Hi, I'm Inson Strider with my Red Hood and the Outlaws issue 32 review. So this review is going to be a little bit different to how I normally handle comic book reviews, because if I'm going to point out the mistakes, which I've handily put in a bunch of just paper slips there just so I can find them that little bit easier, I'm going to have to go through the issue actually just to get those little pieces of paper out and just to point out the mistakes to you. So that isn't a promising start really, is it? Okay, so let's start off on the cover. I don't know what else we can say about that cover. It's surprising that in the Bombshells variant of this very issue, Starfire is wearing more clothes than usual. Okay, so I'm going to just talk briefly about some of the things this issue gets right. Okay, so this issue is mostly silly and a bit over the top, and it actually makes it kind of enjoyable to read. Doesn't make it perfect or in fact good, it makes it enjoyable, and that's about it. You can get through this issue fairly easily. The art in this issue is also very nice, but unfortunately is shared between two artists, which make the whole thing feel a bit disjointed and really disrupts the flow. That's not to say that the issue's art is bad, it just makes it very disjointed. It almost gives it a slightly schizophrenic feeling. The team, as they are, this does seem to be like a sort of very soft reboot. We're reintroduced to the two team as Scott Lobdell is taking over. So it is a good jumping on point for anyone who is unfamiliar with Red Hood and the Outlaws. They could pick this up quite easily, and it tells you enough to know who the characters are. And you do get the general feeling that this team are friends and they genuinely care for each other. So yeah, there's the good points, and I'm just going to have to go through this just kind of semi-quickly, but also just pointing out the things they get wrong. So at the beginning of the comic, the team is, we start with an international terrorist organisation that remains unnamed for some strange reason. We see that Red Hood has stored himself away on board, disguised as one of the armed henchmen of this international unnamed terrorist organisation. It's kind of hard when you don't explain who they are. So he's disguised and he breaks out and he starts gunning them down indiscriminately. We know Red Hood by now and we know who he is. So we then cut to silly, but yeah, if you really put too much questioning into comic books, too much. Roy Harper is outside AK Arsenal, is on the outside of the plane, stood on the hood, and shoots an arrow through, killing both the pilots of the cockpit. Yet again, it's silly, it's over the top, and it's not meant to be taken as anything more than that. Roy Harper takes control of the plane, and Red Hood continues to fight in the back. Now, it's here where I find my first problem. Let's get rid of that piece of paper. And there is an exchange between a hologram and Roy Harper. The hologram says, and I'm quoting, "It is not your fault you need to worry about, US idiot. That this was all a distraction, you a merry moron." To which Roy Harper replies with, "Is this your thing, just hurling a lot of insulting bullshit?" Now, I see what you were trying to do there, Lobdell, with some interesting wordplay, but when you force it, it comes across as forced, and it was a wasted exchange. So Roy Harper does spot from the cockpit of the plane that there is a bomber flying ahead of them, and it is about to drop a bomb. In fact, it's going to drop a bomb on Washington, and the bomb in case is a nuclear warhead. It's at this point that the team calls in Starfire, and she's flying outside the plane, and she said, they actually said, it's your turn, you're up, And she says, and I am quoting, "Did you think I was waiting for permission to act, Jason? This fills me with much squee, as they say on your planet." They do also say on this page that saying it on the internet is not the same as saying it in real life. I can kind of forgive this because on the same page, Starfire does kick a fucking nuke. So I can kind of forgive that. But there's number 2. We then move over, and this is quite funny, because do you remember that scene in Forrest Gump where Forrest Gump, after returning from Vietnam, sees Jenny across the water that is beside the Washington Monument? For all I know, that lake could have a name, but I don't know it. And they run through the water to meet each other in the middle, and the water is about, well, it comes up to their knees, of which to say it's 1.5 meters deep. Well, that's where the nuclear missile hits. It goes in. Wouldn't that have detonated? It would take a hell of a lot deeper water than that to detonate. Anyhow, as we go over the page, the bomb didn't detonate, and we're removing another one here. And Starfire does something. Now I have to say she does something because the artwork is so unclear as to what she actually does. That, and I'm going to show you. That there. We don't know what she does something to stop the nuke from going off, and all there is just like this little puff coming out of the water at the end there. And yeah. Oh, I did miss as well on the previous page, because Red Hood does monologue throughout this entire issue. He's talking about Starfire and her power. He says, "A gift from the same people who turned her into a slave for nearly half her life. If that happened to me, the vengeance I would wreak, power I'd unleash against my enemies." Did you spot it? I'll do it again, that bit slower. "The vengeance I would wreak, power I'd unleash against my enemies." Apparently the editor that Lobdell had to slip this past was also blind, or possibly not even present at the office that day. It's here that we go to the villain, who was the hologram I mentioned earlier, who's over half a country away. Helpful. So he's over half a country away, and he says, as he's talking to, he's talking to like some weird, like clay-looking type of henchman, but he himself is mechanical, and he says to monitors while looking at pictures of Red Hood and Arsenal and Starfire, he says, "You have made a terrible enemy this day. That is an enemy who will fill you with terror, not that I am terrible at being an enemy." Fortunately, that's one of the few things that really irked me about the writing. Okay, so back on the ground, Starfire does share a kiss with Arsenal on the ground. They are an item, they are a couple at this point, and Arsenal does actually say after the kiss to Starfire that, that was a bit insensitive. Isabel has just split up with Red Hood and he may be feeling lonely. It was a bit inappropriate to act that way. It is on the next page that we see Starfire kissing Red Hood. Wait. This is what she says. "I was told you were feeling lonely. I wanted to assure you that you are never alone. You have us, Jason. The three of us have each other." For two panels, Scott Lobdell finally got Starfire right for 2 panels. That is cause for a massive celebration. Who knows, over the next few coming issues, he may get more right. Fortunately for the rest of the issue, it seems to be setting up things that are going to happen over the next coming issues. The opening story arc to Scott Lobdell's return to Red Hood and the Outlaws. They meet up with Dr. Kirk Langstrom, better known as Man-Bat to some of you, who's now acting head of security for SHADE. Don't know when that happened, but apparently it happened. The last time I know, he was still a villain at large after the events of Forever Evil. Apparently now he's working for SHADE. So they are abducted by SHADE, which is kind of bizarre actually. Instead of just asking them to come along, they do use a flashbang and abduct them. But they leave them with all their weapons, so that they're not under any sort of armed guard. It's just like you're here as guests, not as prisoners. And they do lead the team through to what is a crashed Tamaranian ship. And they say like, look, we got a signal coming from this communication, and it's addressed to Starfire herself, whatever this communication is. This communication says, I'm not going to attempt to pronounce the name because I always say Coriander and that's probably wrong, but it says, Princess Coriander Starfire of Tamaran, you are our final hope. Obviously this message was sent by R2-D2. And then, Starfire enters the ship, which has crashed away, the Tamaranian ship. She sees something in there and it causes her to flip out. Something has horrified her and she just takes off and leaves them standing there. And that's where the issue ends. So, by all intents and purposes, this issue is not a great issue. It's not a bad issue. It is decidedly average. But the fact that I could go through this on my first read through and point out a lot of mistakes does really say something. I am not a big comic book reviewer, but I can also point out where this issue succeeds. It's silly and it's intended to be fun. The team do genuinely seem to care about themselves. Starfire, despite the still clothing that she wears, actually starts to seem a bit more like Starfire. When she kicked a nuke, I actually cheered, but she seemed to have sent that plummeting towards the earth a little bit quicker for some strange reason. It's just like she seemed to kick it into orbit, but then the next panels we see it's actually heading towards the ground still. Some of the dialogue was clumsily written. That is Lobdell's fault, including one glaring spelling mistake that I spotted. My spelling is by no means perfect, and when the I power I thing happened, it's supposed to be a power I would. That was just glaring to me. So Scott, is really, this book needs to be either rebooted or given to a new writing team. Back when Scott Lobdell wasn't on this, it actually got very good and very entertaining. I don't know if I'm going to continue with this after reading this first issue. I did do this because it was the request of AlexTheHunted, and any requests I get, I honour. Generally, when I'm reading a comic book series, I would give it 5 issues to fairly pass judgment on it before I just say this series is terrible or this series is bad. But as it is, while this issue does accomplish some things that are good, it also gets some things massively wrong. It is nice to see Starfire though being treated as Starfire should be treated, with just 2 panels where she actually said something that I thought that sounds a lot like old Starfire, the Starfire that I know and love from before, pre-Flashpoint, that I remember in the Teen Titans. So that's my review. It's average. Scott Lobdell's writing is terrible. The art is handled by 2 artists. Both artists are good. It's very disjointed. It makes the book feel like a bit schizophrenic. And I really can, when I'm pulling out a list of things and I just grab some paper quickly, and it's like that, and it's mistakes that I noticed. Really, I'm amateur when it comes to comic books, I really am. But when I'm pulling out a pile of paper like that from mistakes that I've had to put in, the mistakes that I've spotted, DC really needs to think about changing the creative team on this one, if not cancelling or rebooting the series as a whole. I've been N7 Strider, and I should go.